Well, thanks very much for that, Kritika. Yes, over the past few days, we've been getting you all the big CEOs, all the key stakeholders of this BS-4 debate, especially in light of the Supreme Court matter. But one man who has so far chosen to maintain a stoic silence is Pawan Goenka. But thank you very much, Mr. Pawan Goenka, for joining us. And good to have you talking once again on this, sir. Your investors are watching this. They want to hear from you how M&M is going to cope with it. Analysts tracking your stock also want to know a little bit more about it. So let me give you the first words, sir. I mean, how are you responding to the bombshell that was dropped by the Supreme Court last week? You know, one of the sympathizers of the auto industry said that, you know, desperate times calls for desperate measures, and therefore the industry should just sort of, you know, take it in their stride. Your thoughts, Mr. Goenka, before I get into more specific questions.
Well, thank you, Ranajay, for giving me this opportunity. This is a rather difficult interview for me to do because it's a very emotive subject, because the highest court, the Supreme Court, has given a verdict, and that obviously is supreme and something that industry will abide by and has to abide by, because the media as well as the general public to some extent holds auto industry guilty of doing something that it should not have done. While I firmly believe that the industry was right, and I want to take a couple of minutes to explain why I think so, even though it has perhaps been talked about a few times. Now, facts. The fact is that the regulation was very clear, notification was very clear that it is 1st of April 2017 is the date of manufacturing and not date of selling. The Solicitor General has said so in no uncertain terms in the court that that was the intent of the government. It has been not the first time, but about 8th time that this has been done, where the changeover is for manufacturing date. There was, I should say, a concern raised, or perhaps even allegation made, that the industry had stocked up on BS-3 in preparation for the switchover, and will then dump BS-3 vehicles in the market post 1st of April. But the data doesn't indicate that, and data is very, very clear, submitted by the industry. In fact, on 28th February 2017, the stock of BS-3 vehicles was lower than what it was in December 15, and therefore there is no case to be made that industry had piled up on the BS-3 stock. So given all of that, and given the fact that industry is completely aligned with the regulation, with the notification, to suddenly have this bombshell come on us, and with all due respect to the Honorable Court, obviously we will have to abide by it, and we have abided by it, appears to be a bit unfair on the industry. And what it does is that we don't know in future what is sanctity of notifications that come out from the government of India, whether we should act according to those notifications or whether we have to look somewhere else to see what we should be doing. And that's really what my anguish is. And what I feel bad about is that, just one more sentence, please. What I feel bad about is that clearly the industry has been penalized for not doing something that they were not asked to do. At the same time, industry also is being seen as having done something wrong in the eyes of media and in the eyes of general public.
Fair enough, Mr. Goenka. In fact, also to be fair to the Supreme Court, you know, they have taken into account, you know, some of the arguments that you're making. Because if I were to, you know, sort of, you know, bring out the crux of the judgment that the Supreme Court, you know, made out that day, it said that the health of millions of citizens was more important than the commercial interest of manufacturers. And that, to me, perhaps is, you know, is perhaps the big takeaway from this judgment. Many would say, therefore, sir, that, you know, you have made all these arguments even in the court. Despite all of that, the Supreme Court did not take into account these arguments and still went, you know, to essentially ban the sale, you know, the sale of BS-4 vehicles from April 1st. Couldn't, I mean, in retrospect, sir, you know, this is perhaps a closed chapter now. Could the industry have dealt with this, you know, differently? Could the industry have come together perhaps in the middle of last year to try and strategize and, you know, and sort of deliberate on the way forward?
See, in retrospect, a lot of things can be done differently in life. It's not just about this. If you know what future is going to be, we will do many things differently. The commitment of BS-4 fuel being available was from 1st of April 2017. So industry could not have made an assumption that fuel will become available sooner, right? And therefore, there was no way for us to say that we are going to start making BS-4 vehicles, let's say from 1st of January 2017. There is a process of ramping down and a ramping up, and the process was pretty much in place. As you can see from the BS-3 stock, that except for one segment, everywhere else the stock was coming down sort of gradually to a level where at the end of March, we would have been left with perhaps about a third of what is the normal practice for the BS-3 stock. And therefore, there's absolutely no argument, Rananjay, that the health of people, health and the quality of air is of paramount importance. Industry was ready to launch BS-4 throughout the nation as far back as April 2014. We waited for 3 years because the conditions were not right, because the government of India felt that it was not yet ready to implement BS-4, and we could have done it in 2014. And that would have been a lot more beneficial to the health of people, to environment, than to say that for 1 month, we are going to put the whole industry in a tailspin, where 12,000 crores worth of inventory is going to get sort of jeopardized. For what? For 1 month, when we waited for 3 years.
True. Mr. Goenka, then, let me get more specific about M&M then. Are you seeking legal opinion within your company? Is there any way out? Some have mentioned that, perhaps the auto industry can, sort of request the Supreme Court for a curative petition. Have those thoughts started sort of, have you been thinking about what next?
See, there are two parts to the story. The one part is what we had to do on 30th and 31st of March, where we had to almost do a fire sale and sell as many BS-3 vehicles as we could at a very, very high discount. Not just Mahindra, but the whole industry has done that. And by doing so, we have perhaps removed half the BS-3 inventory that we had as on 29th of March. And we have the remaining half still there, and we are still sort of in a fix as to what to do with this remaining half. And this remaining half can either get converted to BS-4, which will be at a fairly significant cost, or can be exported, or can be basically made into scrap. Okay, and we need to see which vehicles go in which of the 3 buckets. The legal options available to us at this point of time are very limited. We still do not have the final sort of order that has been released by the Supreme Court, because what we have the interim order. We will take a look at it, and if there is any possibility for us to request the Supreme Court to revisit the decision, we would certainly want to do that. Now, I hope the Supreme Court takes a lenient view, because we have done our best on 2 days to remove as many BS-3 vehicles as possible from our stock. And what is remaining is vehicles built, and vehicle built as per regulation. I'm sorry to again repeat the same thing. Built as per the notification of Government of India. We have not asked for a single days of leniency in terms of notification that was in place, not a single day. And that's why I find somewhat amazing that when we are not asking for any deviation from the regulation, then why are we getting penalized so much?
Those are important words, actually, Mr. Goenka, that the auto industry is still, you've sort of kept the legal option open. You will, of course, wait for the final Supreme Court order to make your, take the final call. You've said that half of your BS-3 inventory is still unsold. And is that an M&M figure, sir? Or is that an industry figure you're giving us?
I do not have the industry data yet, because it is being compiled today being the first working day after 31st of March. But my understanding overall is that the two-wheeler manufacturers, after giving very heavy discount, as much as 15,000 rupees on a 50,000-60,000 rupee product, have been able to clear most of its inventory. So two-wheelers will be much lower than half. My estimate is that the four-wheelers, that is passenger vehicles, have done quite well in terms of clearing, but the commercial vehicles are the ones that are stuck with fairly huge inventory, because commercial vehicles were BS-3 in half the country almost, and BS-4 in the remaining half, where the passenger vehicles had converted to BS-4 in most cases, even for Mahindra. Passenger vehicles such as XUV, TUV, KUV were all BS-4. There was no BS-3 at all for quite some time. And therefore, passenger vehicles was not that much of a problem. The problem was primarily in commercial vehicles. And there, I think the industry probably will have more than half the inventory remaining, whereas in passenger vehicle, less than half, and two-wheeler, much less than half remaining.
So that means, sir, because the industry at the start was sitting at about 6.5 lakh inventory for unsold commercial vehicles that were BS-3. You're saying half. So we are clearly looking at an inventory size of over 300,000 as we speak. Mr. Goenka, in the statement that you've issued, you've also said that there is going to be one-time material impact on M&M. Could you quantify that to us, sir, since this is the first time we are speaking with you?
Well, if we look at the total inventory that Mahindra had, it was of the order of 3,000 crores, I think, before the court order came. We have been able to remove about half the inventory at approximately, I would say, 15% or so of discount from normal selling price. And the remaining half that we still have, we don't know yet as to what all we will have to do. What we can export obviously will not have much of a cost. What we have to convert to BS-4 will have cost as much as little as 3,000-4,000 rupees for some three-wheelers, to as much as maybe 2 lakh rupees for four-wheelers. So it's not simply a question of converting from BS-3 to BS-4, because when you go from BS-3 to BS-4, sometimes it's just an engine modification, in which case we can do it fairly easily. But in other cases, it is an engine replacement. And when it's engine replacement, it is also a chassis change. It's also a wiring harness change. So I don't have an exact number right now, but we are doing that calculation, and we are looking to see which bucket each vehicle falls in. But let me say, Rananjay, that I am still somewhat hopeful that there will be an leniency that will somehow come in, because to take such a huge amount of inventory and try and sell it in 2 days or convert it to BS-4 is not an easy task. And we also have to have kind of a continuity of regulation, because I really don't know.
True.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, Mr. Goenka, I'm thinking the only way
real concern
can come in is if the... I'm sorry for this, Mr. Goenka, because there's a 5-second lag, and therefore there's a bit of an overlap. But what I was asking, sir, is that the only way there can be a leniency is if the industry, once again takes the legal route. Because here despite the government's representation to the Supreme Court, the fact that the Supreme Court has still stuck to its guns. So you're indicating, that once the order comes out, the industry will look at the possible legal route, whatever legal remedies that there is left.
Well, so legal route can only be, I think, what is called a review petition or a curative petition that we can file. And our lawyers, once the final order comes in, will decide whether there is a case for filing that. My only submission to the Honorable Court would be that there were certain arguments that the industry had made. And perhaps those arguments were not clearly spelled out. It's possible, because if I read the interim order, the Honorable Court has said that the industry knew very well that by 1st April 2017, they have to stop manufacturing BS-4 vehicles. That's in the order. And yet, they did not take a proactive step. So I'm a little bit confused by that, because the industry has taken proactive step. Every vehicle would have been from April 1st that is manufactured would have been BS-4. So industry was fully prepared to meet the notification, and we have not asked for any leniency. That's my only point. We have not asked for any leniency from the notification given. The intent of notification also has been made very clear by the Solicitor General. So I'm just wondering whether industry was able to represent its case properly to the Honorable Court. And if the Honorable Court judges that perhaps certain important facts were not represented properly by industry, and gives us a chance to represent that and perhaps take a different view. That's the only thing. And I think it's important, Rananjay, because we also have to...
Did the legal strategy somewhere also, did the legal, could you have come up with a better legal strategy? At least that's the impression I get, when you're saying this, that did we do enough to sort of, present our case in front of the Supreme Court? Did your legal, could the legal strategy have been better, sir?
No, I don't think so, because I think the arguments that were presented by the industry were fairly clear, fairly extensive. And it's fairly straightforward. Industry didn't have too many different points to be made. All that we have said is that we have followed the notification very clearly. that we have not done any buildup of inventory of BS-3. They're the only two material facts as far as the industry was concerned. Now, whether we should have taken a proactive step and started to manufacture BS-4 3 months in advance and stop making BS-3 3 months in advance is something that in retrospect we can always talk about. But please keep in mind that inventory is not a question of first in, first out. Even if I look at my inventory today, 30% of the inventory is more than 3 months old. 13% inventory is more than 1 year old.
Yeah.
So if I really want to do a very sort of natural reduction to zero, it will take me more than 3 months, not 1 month. And therefore, I would have had to stop making BS-3 on 31st December, perhaps, and start making BS-4 from 1st of January. And then I cannot sell BS-4 because BS-4 fuel is not available throughout the nation. Then what do? I'm in a jam. So this sort of ramping up and ramping down takes time, and there has to be a little bit of overlap between when you stop manufacturing and when you stop selling.
Absolutely, Mr. Goenka. Just hold that thought, because I have to flesh out a few more issues on this subject. I will come back to you, Mr. Goenka. Just hold your thoughts. We'll quickly slip into a break. There's a few more issues that I want you to address, Mr. Goenka. Let's slip into a break. We'll be back with more on this. Stay tuned.